wind off Lake Michigan had a particular cruelty in early December. It didn't simply blow it carved. It found every seam in your coat, every gap between your scarf and collar, and it worked its way in like a knife slipping between ribs. By 8:30 that Wednesday evening, the temperature on South Wacker Drive had dropped to -11 Celsius, and the few pedestrians still out were moving fast, heads down, wanting nothing more than a warm train car or a heated lobby. Daniel Marsh noticed the cold the way a man notices background noise. It was simply there, constant and indifferent, the same as it had been every winter of his 34 years in this city. He pulled his wool cap lower over his ears and shifted the strap of his canvas bag on his shoulder. 12 hours in the Halstead cold storage warehouse. His hands still ached from it, even through the double-layer gloves. He thought about the bowl of chicken soup waiting on the stove at home. He'd put it in the slow cooker before his shift, one of those small domestic victories that had become the architecture of his weeks. His daughter Abigail was 9 years old and had a science presentation in the morning. He'd promised to quiz her on the water cycle before bed. His neighbor, Carolyn Briggs, was watching her. Carolyn was 71, a former schoolteacher who had become, in the 2 years since Daniel's wife passed, something close to a second grandmother to Abigail. He needed to be home by 9. He was cutting through the financial district because the 29 bus ran along Michigan Avenue, and he could save 20 minutes over the red line. That was the calculation. 20 minutes. Abigail. The water cycle. Soup. He was 2 blocks from the bus stop when he saw the crowd. It wasn't a large crowd. A dozen people, maybe 15, gathered on the broad steps of a tower he recognized as Arden Financial Plaza, a glass and steel structure whose lobby was visible through the revolving doors, warm and amber lit. On the sidewalk in front of the building, separated from that warmth by nothing but plate glass and 10 feet of cold air, sat a collection of objects. 2 leather suitcases, a briefcase, a cardboard box, a silk scarf on the pavement, half buried in the snow that had fallen that afternoon and been only partially shoveled. A woman stood in the middle of it all. She was maybe 37 or 38. Dark coat cashmere, Daniel would have guessed, though he had no real basis for that judgment. Dark hair. She was standing completely still in a way that people only stand when they've gone past shock into something quieter and more terrifying. Her phone was in her hand, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at the revolving door as though trying to understand a problem in a language she no longer spoke. Inside the lobby, visible through the glass, a security guard stood with his arms crossed. Behind him, at a slight distance, a man in a dark suit watched from the middle distance with the careful neutrality of someone who has arranged for something unpleasant and is now waiting for it to conclude. Daniel paused. He was good at reading situations. Quickly, you had to be. Working warehouse logistics, understanding flow and obstruction, and the difference between a problem that would resolve itself and one that wouldn't. This was the second kind. One of the bystanders nearby, a young man in a delivery uniform, was watching with his phone half raised, uncertain whether to record. A woman in a fur-lined hood had already moved on. A man in a suit glanced at the scene, kept walking, the calculation of inconvenience visible on his face. The woman on the steps sat down. Not gracefully, she simply stopped standing, lowered herself onto the cold stone of the top step, and put her face in her hands. Everyone else walked past. Daniel set down his bag and crossed the sidewalk. Up close, he could see she was shaking, partly cold, partly something else. The silk scarf in the snow caught his attention, and without thinking, he picked it up and folded it. She looked up when she heard him crouch down to retrieve it. Her eyes were very dark. Whatever composure she'd once had was still visible in her face, the residue of someone accustomed to maintaining surfaces. But the surfaces had cracked. "Hey," he said. "Are you okay?" It was a stupid question. He knew it immediately. She stared at him for a moment as if trying to categorize him threat, stranger, distraction. Then she said, "I'm fine. I just need a minute." Her voice was controlled, clipped, the voice of someone whose default setting was competence. Daniel looked at the suitcases, the cardboard box, the briefcase on the sidewalk. He looked at the security guard visible through the glass. He stood up and looked at the address on the building. Arden Financial Plaza. He'd seen the name somewhere recently. Then it clicked, the business section of the Tribune. A headline he'd scanned while waiting for his break to end. Asterisk, Carter Dynamics Board votes to remove founder CEO in surprise coup. He looked at the woman again. "You're Sophia Carter," he said. It wasn't quite a question. She didn't confirm it immediately. The crowd had thinned. Most people had moved on. The delivery man had lowered his phone. The guard inside had stopped watching. Daniel picked up one of the suitcases. "It's -11, he said. "Nobody's fine out here. I'll call someone." But her phone was still in her hand, and she wasn't dialing. "Call them from somewhere warm." He picked up the second suitcase. "I live about 4 stops north. It's not much, but it's not this." She looked at him the way people look at strangers who offer unexpected kindness with suspicion, because kindness from strangers is something people learn not to trust. "I don't know you," she said. "Daniel Marsh." He said it simply, without performance. "I work warehousing at Halstead Cold Storage. I have a 9-year-old daughter named Abigail and a bowl of soup on the stove. That's the full picture." She stared at him. The wind cut down the canyon between the buildings. Her coat, good as it was, wasn't meant for standing still. "This is insane," she said. "Probably." He waited. Another long pause. She looked once more at the revolving door, at the guard, at the man in the suit who was no longer watching. She looked at the cardboard box on the sidewalk. A framed photograph was visible at the top of it, half wrapped in newspaper. "I need to get the box," she said, finally. "I'll get it," he said. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building on South Loomis Street in Pilsen. The elevator had been out since October and hadn't been repaired yet. They carried everything up the stairs. Daniel took the 2 suitcases and Sophia carried the briefcase and the cardboard box. And neither of them spoke much, except for Daniel saying, "Second landing," then left. The apartment was small. That was the first thing. Not cramped, not filthy, but undeniable.